Hello, do battle. Welcome to Bad Boy Running. And today we've got a subject that we've already just been talking about. That it's amazing it's taken us this long to discuss, because it's something that we all deploy, even if we won't admit it. It's almost the dark side of running. That actually we're hoping to turn that into full flip side reverse, into the bright light. That actually run walking is a positive, can be used to qualify for Boston, run good paces. But we've already got sidetracked with our next guest talking about rum and the fact he's done Hardrock 16 times and is just about to go for his 30th Disney marathon this weekend. So we're probably going to chat about all those things as well. But welcome to the podcast, the wonderful Chris Twiggs.
Hey! Thank you.
Is the Disney marathon, is that the same as the goofy part of that?
Yeah. So the Disney marathon started in 1994 as just a marathon. And then
wait, it's 1994, 30 years ago. What? This is what?
This is a good question.
What? That can't be true. That can't be right.
Fast forwarded a year.
What?
So hard to believe. But so they so then I don't remember how many years after they started the marathon, but they started a half marathon. And it was kind of cool because the marathon, you got a Mickey Mouse medal, which makes sense. And then for the half marathon, you got a Donald Duck medal, which is kind of cool.
Could I just ask, when someone describes something as Mickey Mouse in the UK, it kind of means it's shit and a bit of a joke. Is that the same in America? Because a Mickey Mouse medal would just be a
Mickey Mouse medal, yeah. Those are the kind of things David hands out at his races.
Yeah. Is it the same in America, or?
It has the same meaning, sure. It has the same meaning, but that doesn't. But who cares? There are a lot of people, and I'm one of them, who I live in Florida, and so part of my growing up was going to Disney whenever I got straight A's on a report card, or various things like that. So Disney was part of my life, and so when Disney started a marathon in 1994, I had just gotten married actually, and my wife told me, hey, Disney's going to have a marathon. We should do that thing. And I was not a runner. At all. And, but I was a big fan of Disney, and she convinced me to do it. And so we did that marathon. And then several years into the process, Disney came up with the idea of, let's have they used to run the half marathon and the marathon at the same time. In fact, the half finished at the halfway point of the marathon, and some people would just stop there. And they came up with the idea that if they moved the half marathon to Saturday and kept the marathon on Sunday, they could get people to do both, charge them more, and give them another medal. And so they called that the Goofy. And Disney, Mickey Mouse might mean silly or might mean half-assed, but I'll tell you what, that mouse is really smart when it comes to making money.
I love it.
And so not only do they have the Goofy, which I did the first year they offered it, I did the Goofy because I thought I wanted the Donald Duck medal. I had all the Mickey Mouse medals. I wanted the Donald Duck medal. So I got the Goofy along the way. That's the only year that I did anything other than the marathon. Ever since, I only do the marathon. But now they have the Dopey, which is a 5K on Thursday, a 10K on Friday, a half marathon on Saturday, and a marathon on Sunday. And believe it or not, there are people that will do that as their first marathon. They've never run a marathon, and they're going to do it after running those other three races. It's crazy. And
in terms of experience, is it in the morning before everything's open up? Are the crowds there just for the marathon? Does Mickey and all the characters come out? Are you running through Epcot Center? Like, how involved is it?
All of it. So Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Goofy and Minnie, they're all up there on the stage with the fireworks and everything when it starts. They have character stops along the way, and some runners will run until they see a character they want, and then they'll line up to get their picture taken with that character.
Any old excuse to stop.
Seriously. And so, they'll sprint from one to another. And they have 4 race weekends at Disney in Florida. They used to have 4 race weekends at Disneyland in California. Those have been gone for a while, but just today they announced the Disneyland half marathon is coming back in January of 2024. And but the other races go through some of the parks, but the marathon, because it's long enough, 42K, goes through all of the parks. It starts at Epcot, it runs up to the Magic Kingdom. You run through Cinderella's castle. You run through the Animal Kingdom, past all the
zoo,
all the stuff there. And the zoo, basically. You see the animals out there, and then you run through Hollywood Studios, and then you finish off running back around Epcot, passing in front of Spaceship Earth and into the parking lot to the finish line.
Can you do any are any rides available?
Yeah.
Really? So
how do you pay it? Like, do you pay for entry to the park, or do you get entry to the park when you pay for the weekend? Like, I'm curious as to how they price that and how that works. Or how does that work?
Entry to the park is separate from the race. The race is a separate thing. When the race started, they did it. I don't remember what time it started in the first year, but it starts much earlier than it used to. It used to start late enough that I can remember coming through Hollywood Studios, which is around 20 miles. I can remember coming through there, and the park was already open. And I would have been on back then. I would have been on about a 3:40 pace or something like that. And I can remember coming through, and that park was open. And then, of course, Epcot as the last park, it would be open as well. And some people will stop and they'll get on rides and things like that. Now, at the pace that I'm running, usually none of the parks are open yet, because now they start at 5 a.m.
Ooh.
And so, I'm done by 8:30 or so, and the parks don't open until 10. But they will before the parks are open, they'll let families come in just to cheer on people as they're running through. And some of the people that are either slower runners or they're on purpose running slower will time it so that they can go on. Not only will they go on rides, this may be a race right up your alley. Not only will they go on rides, there's this thing about how many drinks can you get as you're going around World Showcase on the last few miles. There are pictures of people crossing the finish line with a margarita in each hand.
There's nothing that says Disney like creating a drinking marathon out of it, is there?
I tell you what, that's that's a big thing at Epcot Center. So it's people do take rides. I don't, because I have done it every year. This will be the 30th year. I think there are 45 of us, I think, that have done it every year.
Do you have a special name? Do you have a special name for the 45?
They call us they call us perfect marathoners. So we're the perfect marathoners. Yeah.
Oh, they call you ka-ching. That's what they call you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they definitely have gotten their money's worth. They certainly we paid plenty in the early years. They've honored us in different ways. Every 5 years, they've done something new to honor us. At the 25th year, they actually surprised us by giving us free entry to the marathon for as long as we keep the streak going.
Wow, that's cool. That's great. That's really cool.
Yeah. So as long as we keep the streak going, we don't have to pay for the race, which is why. So I coordinate the pacers for the Disney races, and for several years I would run as a pacer, because that way I didn't have to pay for the race. And but now that they've given me free entry as a perfect marathoner, I give my pacing spot I assign somebody else to that.
And who's the youngest perfect pacer?
That's me.
Oh, hello. So
you're
already seeing the road ahead, right?
I will. They all know, the other 44. They all know I'm the youngest one. I realize I've got a target on my back. But there's some of them that are obviously they're all older than I am, but there's some of them that are in their 70s, and they're still doing it. And they do let the perfect marathoners start in the first corral, which the race is big enough that starting in the first corral effectively gives the runners an extra hour over the normal cutoff. So it's a 7-hour cutoff, and it's a rolling. They're designated back of the packers. They call them the balloon ladies, and anybody who falls behind the balloon ladies could get. I assume
they carry balloons not because they're the size of.
No, they just carry balloons. Yes. Yes. But because they put the perfect in the front corral, I think that's extended the lifespan of some of those marathoners by a few years, giving them 8 instead of 7 hours effectively.
Oh, that's interesting. So it takes an hour for the back to start.
Yeah,
How many people is it?
Oh golly, I thought we were talking about something else. I didn't do my research. I would say in the neighborhood of 20,000.
And is that because they hold starts and they stagger them, or?
Right, they do.
Okay,
they do. There's different corrals, but then they hold and release, because there's some bottlenecks. I mean, because you're running through the theme parks.
Yeah, of course.
And the parks are not designed. It's not like London, right, where you've got the whole wide streets of London. There are some places that get pretty narrow, and that's why for the pacers, it's really important for them to know where those spots are and anticipate them, and maybe get a little bit of a buffer in places because they know they're going to lose it when they hit the bottlenecks and things like that.
I mean, and that's true even of the biggest marathons, right? New York, London. If you've got corners, you've got streets that are narrow.
Oh yeah. No, New York. I ran New York this year, and there were points in New York when I was where it got really narrow. I mean, down to maybe 2 people side by side could pass through, but that was about it. And I ran, I don't know, 3:45, something like that. I wasn't fast, but I wasn't super slow. I wasn't where I thought the bottlenecks would be. I wasn't where I thought the crowded parts would be.
Kind of 4:30 mark, wouldn't it be normally? And actually, in the past, I've done London's where I think when I did my first one in 1990, I don't know, 8 or something. Similarly, we had to walk some bits because it was just too jammed. I think they've resolved that now. But and then before we go into the run walk, then, so Hardrock, you've done 16 of those.
I have,
which just seems an improbability more than anything else. But talk. What was the first one, and how's the race and the application and the community changed through those years?
So 2005 was my first one, and I did Hardrock. I didn't know Hardrock was Hardrock. I didn't know it was special. But I did it because it would be like living in London and doing the London Marathon, not thinking I want to run a world major, just it's my marathon in my hometown. I want to do it. My wife's great grandmother was born in one of the small mining towns that Hardrock goes through. And so I would go there with my wife in the summer after our kids were born. I wanted them to experience traveling out. We live in Florida, but I wanted them to experience the mountains in their summer breaks. And when I found out there was a 100-miler that came through there, I was like, wow, that'd be really cool. And I did about a 4-year process of working my way up to the 100-mile distance. And then I had to run a qualifier. Even back then, you had to have a qualifier for Hardrock. And there was a lottery then, but there weren't as many people that were in it. And I got in. Back then, the policy was if you finished Hardrock 3 times within 5 years, then you were automatic. You bypassed the lottery. And then Hardrock is, as I'm sure you know, Hardrock goes clockwise 1 year and counterclockwise another year. So I did it the first time, and my wife thought I was done. She thought I got it out of my system. But I said, but you're not a true Hardrocker until you've done it in both directions. So I got to do it next year to go the other direction. So I got in the second year, did the other direction, applied the third year. My wife just threw her hands up and said, oh, great. You've got the bug. I'm never going to get you away from it.
Are you still together?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. When he said
no, okay, good. We're coming up on our 30th wedding anniversary. So so then I did it the third year, and I bypassed the lottery for my 4th year. And then people discovered Hardrock. It became popular. So they changed the rules. And so they changed it so that if you had anybody who had finished Hardrock 5 times ever, they bypassed the lottery, but everybody else had to go back in the lottery. So I bypassed it in my 4th year, but then when they made that change, I was thrown back in the lottery. I actually was waitlisted, but I was high enough on the wait list that I got in. And so that was my 5th finish. And so I bypassed the lottery a couple more times, and then they changed the lottery again. And what they did when they changed it again was they set up 3 categories. There was a category for people that had finished it more than 5 times. They called them veterans. That was my category. They had a category who had finished it, but had finished it once, but had not gotten to 5 yet. that were called everybody else. And then they had the nevers, people that never finished it were in the never category. Actually, when they first changed it, the never category was never started. So it was a mistake. It was a big mistake they made because the nevers were the never started. So there was an incentive for people to start the race. And if they started, even if they didn't finish, they automatically got moved into the else category, which gave them a better chance of getting in.
Oh, so people would turn up injured knowing they weren't going to finish.
Right, but they would start anyway because they knew that they had a better chance next year. So they fixed that problem after a couple of years. They fixed that problem and changed it from the never started to the never finished category. And so those 3 lotteries existed for the last few years. Last year, for the first time, they decided to create separate lotteries for women in each of those divisions.
Yeah.
And those women's lotteries would be based on the percentage of women who had entered the lottery. So if 10% of the veterans in the veteran pool were women, then 10% of the spots going to veterans would go to women. They made sure that happened. That was good or bad. I think it was good because it's good to make sure that at least that percentage is getting, and I think that's great. The bad thing was it meant that the only way for a woman to get in off the wait list was for a woman to drop out of the race. And so lots of men rolled in off of the wait list, but very few women got to move in off the wait list because there were very few women's spots. They were limited.
So I'm trying to think in my head how that works. So, because you'd have thought it would be similar.
No, I mean, let's say there are 10 of us in this podcast, and one is designated as a woman's spot, and you've got a wait list of women and a wait list of men. And if you said that if one of the 9 men drops off the podcast, a man can come in, then there's going to be 9 times that a man's going to drop out and another man come in, as opposed to the one time that woman is going to. So anyway, that was what happened up to last year. And then for this year, they changed it again. They got rid of the veteran category.
But although surely as more women finished 5, then that would increase the percentage. So then it wouldn't be 10%, it would be 12%, or so the number of women places go up.
Yeah, and it's the number of women in each of those spots, right? So it was also the number of women in the never pool. If 15% of the never pool was made up of women, then they would have a separate lottery, and 15% of the spots reserved for nevers would go to women. And they've maintained that. So for this year, they still have that. They still have separate lotteries for men and women based on the percentages that are in the lottery. But they got rid of the veterans. They didn't get rid of us, but they got rid of that as a category. And now it's just you finished it before or you've never finished it before. Those are the two pools. And then they also this year they gave people a credit for times that they had entered the lottery but not started the race since the last time they had started the race. And what that did is it meant that there were some people, even though I've never DNF'd, I've finished it 16 times in a row, but there were some people that had been in the lottery several times and had, maybe they hadn't been as lucky as I was. And so it meant that there were some people that had as good a chance of getting in as I did. And I had a much lower chance than I used to, because instead of being in a pool of just the veterans, I was in a pool with all the folks. So I am so far down on the wait list for Hardrock this year that you would need you'd need a headlamp to try to find me down in that hole. So I will not be running Hardrock this year. And
how do you kind of view it? Because we've spoken in the past to numerous people, some of which are elites who are getting their place, some of which are kind of elites but might not get a place, some of which we've discussed the fact that to encourage more females in the sport, you almost need to actually increase the percentage of applicants. But we haven't interviewed someone who is probably the person most affected by trying to even up the numbers or trying to encourage new runners. And how do you view, what's your view in it, where there is an element of it's nice to have these returnees to keep the community, and also to have that someone who's run it so many times is a great story. But then when it's such a treasured place, almost re-gift your 17th experience is never going to be as impactful on your life as anyone else's first. So kind of, how do you view your position in all of this?
Yeah. So first of all, in terms of the women, that, you know, I'm not impacted by that. The reality is the number of women that are in the race this year and last year are about the same. It's just chance has given it about the same number of women. It's just now it's encoded into the requirements of the race. So I'm all for that. No problem with that at all. Nobody feels sorry for the guy with 16 Hardrock finishes. Nobody feels sorry for the guy who doesn't get to go for number 17. And what I love, what made me fall in love with this race is yes, the talent that it goes through, because I won't do it this summer. Well, I will in training because I want to, but literally the Hardrock runs right past the mine where my wife's great grandmother was born. I mean, if the old house were still standing there, you'd be able to see it as you run past that mine. So I love that. But I also, what really made me fall in love with it was the people that had done it many, many times, that had those great stories.
Yeah.
And I got to learn from them, not just during the race, but I got to learn from them when I would go out on training hikes and training runs with these people. And so to me, what's important is it is very, very, for a race like Hardrock, it's very important to have that history. It's very important to have that experience. It's very important that when you come to run Hardrock the first time, you get the chance to hike with me or with other people. You get the chance to go over the course and learn the things and hear the stories. Hear, you know, what it was like when there was too much snow on that particular part of the course and we had to reroute this way, or what it was like when the mudslide came down and they cut off, they stopped people going on the course except for Hardrockers during the race, and so none of us knew we were going to find.
Okay.
So I think hearing those stories and having that experience is really cool, and that's what made me want to come back year after year after year and learn from those old timers. And now I'm an old timer, right? I'm one of those guys. And so I really want to be there this summer to share those stories to anybody who cares. And there will be people, I have come across people out there training in the San Juans in the summer who do not like me, do not want me around. They think they're smarter than me. They think they are faster than me. And they think their first time doing Hardrock, they're going to finish in 30 hours, and they're going to be the next Killian, and they've got nothing to learn from me. And I think anybody, no matter how fast they are, who thinks they've got nothing to learn from somebody who's finished that race 16 times is a moron. So I want to be out there and have that opportunity to those that are interested, right? And so what I'm going to be doing this summer is I am going to be leading hikes on the Hardrock course. It's a part of the official Camp Hardrock experience in the weeks leading up to the race. I and some of my friends who have done it many times, we will be leading hikes so that we will cover every inch of the course for those that want to see it. And we'll go at an easy pace so that nobody's left behind, and you'll be able to see it, because there are some parts of that course that you should not see for the first time during the race. I remember going up Grant Swamp Pass one year, and early in the race, and it's a hard climb up from Cam Traverse, and going up that side, Island Lake side. It's beautiful. And as we got to the top, this rookie was kind of gasping, and he said, "God, that was incredible." And I said, "Well, the other side is even better." He said something like, "Yeah, I can believe it." And I said, "Have you seen it yet?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, then no, you really can't believe it." And we got over, and the side that goes down to Chapman Gulch is the steepest thing ever, and you're going down in loose rocks and scree. And he looked at that, and we go down that? Yeah, you go down that. And I just trudged on down, and it's a slide and a fall all in one. That's something you need to see ahead of time. It's something you shouldn't see for the first time during a race. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do. I think it's an opportunity for us that have done it a bunch of times to give back to the race, to be there as a resource, and to show that you don't have to have a number pinned on your chest to be a part of the Hardrock family.
Yeah, and I've never actually had it. We've never had it explained in a way that does make sense, as losing that social history would be a shame.
I mean,
so. If the metaverse ever does anything positive and makes any money for Facebook, maybe it's in creating an experience where there's people like yourself who are on the course and film it, and so that people who aren't there can actually go on their treadmill and try. I mean, you can't replicate the crawling down. I mean,
oh, golly.
A hell of a treadmill. But
I would love that. I want that treadmill. I want that treadmill. Yeah, you know, and let's hope you're right, because you know, Lord knows Facebook needs money, right? It definitely needs to find a way to make money.
When will it earn some cash?
When will
Zuckerberg? But yeah, that's a really nice way of. That's why people are drawn to these races. But actually, it seems like we are in a transition now where I think Instagram has almost taken over the fuel for the excitement for these races versus the word of mouth amongst the community. So if anything, it's more likely in the future that races like your Western States, UTMBs, are just going to be fueled with newcomers who don't understand the history, don't care about the history, and it will then lose that history and lose that community.
And it's incumbent on the race committees and the race directors to find that balance, to find a way to continue to have some element of that history, if that's what they want, right? If that's what they want. They could decide instead that they just want to make a ton of money, and so they could just bring in a lot of really fast people and raise the prices up sky high so that only the rich and the fast get to do the races, which is might as well be Ironman at that point. And you know,
and so I'm sure some will. I mean, if you look at the big four hundies, should we say, three in the States, one in France, one of those probably will, maybe two of them. But I think that will tell the test of time over the next 15, 20 years, how people perceive
and
it.
And there are other races, there are smaller races that have come along and they're don't stop at 100 miles, right? There's Cocodona 250, and there's all these other 200 milers and 300 milers that are out there. And so there's always going to be an adventure for those of us that are looking for an adventure.
True, but I guess if having to do 100-mile every year to keep your status is hard enough, if you're having to do like some of Candice's races, where if you're having to do 250 miles every year for a race,
that's a hard one.
Yeah.
I was actually, I normally only do, Hardrock is usually my only 100. And I actually got the news, the lottery was held. I was pacing a friend during his first 100-mile race in Daytona Beach, Florida. I was pacing him during that, and I was checking my phone as I was pacing him, and I'm watching the names go by in the lottery, and I'm paying less and less attention to him and more attention to my phone as I'm getting angrier and angrier and sadder. But by the time I had gotten home, I decided, okay, that's what that is. I'm still going. I've committed to going. Even before the lottery, I had told Dale Garland, the race director, that I was on board to lead the veteran hikes. And so I'm still going to do that. And I've got a 100-miler I'm going to run in May, and another one I'll run in July that's there in the same mountains. It's just not on the exact same course. So,
and hopefully there is a good system that can still, because it's constantly changing, developing, but where by getting people who are more experienced on the course in volunteer stations, I could see it in the future, them tying in doing those to increasing your chance of getting on the lottery?
They do. No, they do.
Okay,
If you're on the board, you get extra ticket. If you're an aid station captain, you get an extra ticket. If you do trail work, there's specific trail work that you do on those trails there, you can get extra tickets. So yeah, there are ways for people to do that. And I encourage people that want to do the race. I've got a guy that I coach who really wants to do Hardrock, and so he's going to come out. He's got no chance of getting in this summer. Had no chance of getting in this summer, but he'd already booked a place to stay. He's going to come out. He's going to do the trail work. He's going to volunteer. He just wants to be there and be a part of it. And I really think that should be a requirement anyway. I think before you do that race, you should have to be there and check it out and volunteer for it, or pace somebody, or do something so that you really have your eyes wide open when you do the race the first time yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's crack on to walk running.
Yeah.
Then.
What was it you wanted me to talk about?
How long have we gone? Half an hour, and that's fine. That's fine. Plenty of time left. How did you? Because I initially came across yourself and kind of the Jeff Galloway method. Is it Galloway? I remember that right.
Galloway.
Galloway. Through I think it was a Runner's World article or similar, where it was discussing the benefits of, I think the headline was along the lines of, I qualified for a Boston qualifier doing walk run, something big like that. How did you first get exposed to that theory or that methodology?
I heard Jeff Galloway talk the day before a marathon, and we had used, so Jeff Galloway's first book, Galloway's book on running, was the all-time best-selling book on running when it for the first several years of its publication. It's in the third edition now. I really do believe that the third edition of Galloway's book on running is the best running book that exists. I really believe that.
Wow, that's a bold claim, yeah.
Well, I mean, he signs my paychecks, so you can take that. I really do believe that. And so I used his, but my wife and I, when we trained for our first marathon, we used some other book. I don't even remember what it was, but I do remember I had to run I remember running a 13-mile training run in the middle of the week, like a Wednesday night. I was newly married, still in graduate school, working 3 jobs. And I'd just gotten off work from one of those jobs, and I had to do a 13-mile run in the middle of the week. And I said, there's got to be a better way to do this. So we looked around to find another book, and we found Jeff Galloway's book on running. And Galloway's book on running, to me, in the other books that were out there were written by elites, and they took what worked for elites and they tried to pare them down a little bit for regular people.
Yeah. Okay.
Jeff Galloway was an Olympian in 1972. He's an Olympian. He absolutely was an elite. But his book was written it looked at what can regular people do, and then how can regular people accomplish these goals: 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon. And so his basic plan is a 3-day-a-week training plan, 2 short runs during the week and a long run on the weekend. And so the reason we chose that book to train for our next marathon was because it fit into our schedules. I can give you a 20-mile long run on Sunday if you tell me I only have to run 45 minutes twice during the week. I'll take that deal, right? So that's what brought me to him. And then he was speaking at the Disney Marathon. It was the second year of the Disney Marathon. He was a speaker there. And my wife and I heard him talking. He was talking about walk breaks. And we thought it was nuts. Come on, walking? I mean, how are we going to make up for all that time we're going to lose? We're going to lose so much time walking. There's no way this can work. But he swore that not only would it make us feel better, but we could go faster using this method. So we talked about it the night before, and we decided, all right, we've got nothing to lose. Why not? We'll try it. Now, in our first marathon, my wife had finished 1 minute ahead of me in our first marathon.
Nice.
And so I knew I was going to go faster in this next marathon. And so we decided to take the walk breaks, and we did. And I did. I went 15 minutes faster in my second marathon using walk breaks. And I was thrilled. I was thrilled to go 15 minutes faster. But what sold us on the walk breaks was my wife, who had run a 4:15 her first marathon, The first run she did with walk breaks, we'd never trained that way. The first run she did with walk breaks was the 1995 Disney Marathon, and she ran 3:38 and qualified for Boston with walk breaks. And we were sold. I mean, how do you argue against that? Her first time taking walk breaks, and she unexpectedly takes more than half an hour off her time. It was massive. And so we started using that method for all of our marathons. And it took me a while. I didn't qualify right away. It took me a while to get there. But eventually, I was able to qualify. I qualified several times. I'll be running. I ran Boston this past year. I'll be running Boston again this year. My wife has run it many times. She'll be running it again this year.
You first heard that that talk from Jeff, and you heard about the idea, and and then obviously you went and tested it. I imagine that you. I mean, how much internal resistance was there? Because the thing with Run Walk is that there's a lot of runners out there who are just like, if you walk, you're not running properly. You're not a proper runner.
Sure.
The identity, it's in some way it's not pure in that sense. So how did you, I mean, is that thing that initially came up, or were you not wedded to that initially? And I suppose when you start talking about it, is there a kind of a resistance to it as you would expect there to be?
There is. Yeah. So we were surprised. We were very surprised. And it's in Jeff's, but for years I told people, he didn't say take walk breaks in that first book. For years I told people that. And then one day, now, 1995 was that first time. I started working for Jeff in 2010. So there was a lot of time between then and when I started working for Jeff. And but I was at a race expo, and Jeff was there. We were in our booth, and I was telling people, I was telling that story. I said in that first book, the walk breaks weren't in there. And Jeff corrected me. He said, no, they're in there. Really? I said, yeah, they're in there. And so I went back and I found that old book, and oh my God, they are in there. I ignored it. I just ignored that part of it. And so there was some resistance, but we really did come down on the side of, the man is brilliant on the page. Everything about the book made sense to us. And so we're going to take a leap of faith. We're going to try it. We believed him for 6 months training for this race. We're going to believe him one more day. And if he's wrong, then by golly, we'll tell everybody he was wrong, and we'll never do that again. And so I definitely see the resistance. Now, people who I've raced against for years, who absolutely positively refuse to take walk breaks. And they are now, used to be, we were very, very close in pace, and they're now slower than I am. I'm beating them regularly. They still refuse to take walk breaks. And so what it comes down to is some people want that badge of honor to say, I never walked, I ran the whole thing. And for some people, that badge of honor is more important than a fast finish time.
Yeah. Do you think it is? Do you think it is just that though? Because it could also be in that if you are a runner who's done lots of marathons, there's a fear of walking, and the fear is when you start walking, you don't stop walking. And so for them, that you almost have to unpick that association between walking is linked to actually having blown up and then just battling on. And so it could be
you have to turn that on its head.
Yeah. So that it could be their fear that, because that's my first instinct is, well, one of my natural instinct would be, my interval sessions are slower than my steady runs on average, because of the breaks. But also my fear would be, well, I can understand the principles behind it, but do those walking breaks get longer? Does the pace get harder to keep? Does all these question marks? Whereas there's the control element of, I just run this pace and I don't stop. It seems a lot easier than, okay, 5 minutes now, stop. And even though it may be easier because you get the breaks, it's, would I trust myself?
Yeah, I get that. And absolutely, most people, they'll say, oh, well, I tried run walk and it didn't work for me. And when I asked, well, what did you try? It's, well, I ran 20 miles and then I was feeling tired. And so I started doing run walk. And so that's not trying, right? Trying it would be from the beginning, stay on schedule. And when that watch beeps at 5 minutes or whatever the ratio is you're going to use, when it beeps, you walk. And then when it beeps again, you run, and you just trust it from the beginning. And when you use it from the beginning, it's much easier to maintain. Now, you've got to find the right ratio. Too much walking is definitely a problem. Jeff used to recommend 1 minute walk breaks. And what we found over the years and getting a lot of feedback from a lot of people is that if you take a 1 minute walk break, eventually you start going slower and slower during that minute, the longer the run gets. And if you're going slower and slower during the walk and you're trying to maintain an even pace, the only way to do that is to go faster on the run phase, which makes you more tired when you start the walk. And so it gets harder and harder to maintain. So 30 seconds seems to be the sweet spot for the walk break. 30 seconds, if you take it early enough, take the walk break early enough, you can catch your breath. You can let your heart rate come down a little bit. You can stretch a little bit if you need to, and then go again. And if you late in the race, if you start to feel antsy, if you start to feel like it's hard to get going again, absolutely cut out the walk breaks and run on in. The first time I qualified for Boston, I did run walk for 15 miles. And then at 15, I caught the pacers and I was nervous. Once I'd started pretty far behind him, and I caught the pacers at 15 miles and I was nervous. And so I decided I'm going to cut out the walk breaks. I would stay with the pacers. And I remember at 25 miles or 24 miles, I was the only one still with the pacers. And they were like, you need to go. You're feeling fine. I'm like, no, I'm staying right here with you because I've never gone this fast before. And I'm counting on you to get me there. And the second time I qualified, I think I did run walk for the first 18 miles. And then I cut them out at that point. The last few times I've qualified, I've taken the walk breaks regularly all the way through. And, because Boston has gotten harder to get in, they've made it 10 minutes. Now that over the years, they made it 5 minutes harder and then another 5 minutes harder. So now at 52 years old, I'm still trying to run the same time that I needed to qualify back when I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
So that's kind of rough because I don't feel as fast as I did in my 30s, but I still am required to run as fast as I did in my 30s.
And with those 30-second breaks, how long would the run typically be then?
So it depends, right? So we've got a chart and it depends on how fast you're running. So let's say when I'm running as a pacer, I typically, and so I'm going to be pacing the London Marathon this year. My time that I've been given is 4 hours, 10 minutes. And so my ratio will be 2 minute run, 30-second walk at that pace. So if I were last year I paced 6 hours at London. And my ratio was 30 seconds run, 30 seconds walk. So the slower runners take the walk breaks more often. The faster runners take the walk breaks less often. One great thing that Run Walk does, by the way, one great thing is it allows you to run when you're running. You can run closer to your natural running pace. If you're doing a marathon, you can't run a marathon at the same pace that you run a half marathon, right? I mean, nobody does. If you're racing, you're going to run that half marathon about a minute per mile faster or so than a marathon. So when you run a marathon, you have to slow yourself down, right? They're really, the way I see it, there are only two ways to slow yourself down to a marathon pace. One is to run slower. And if I have a natural running gait, if I have a natural running pace, and I hold myself back to run slower, that's got to impact my biomechanics. That's got to negatively impact my biomechanics if I'm holding back and I'm consciously running slower than what my body wants to run. But if I slow myself down by putting in walk breaks, I can run the pace that I'm used to running. I can run half marathon pace during that interval, whether it's 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes or whatever it is. And then with the walk break, it slows down my overall pace so that it's sustainable throughout the entire 42K.
Because I mean, that's interesting. I'm not sure if I completely agree on that. Partly because marathon pace actually feels really fast when you're not ready for the marathon race day. If I was to go out now and try and run marathon pace, I could probably do 5-6 miles before I lost pace. So it's I guess it depends where you see. If you think of something like a VO2 max, you're looking at like a half-hour run, which for me would be around that kind of a marathon. So I see what you're saying, but I mean, have you studied people's forms when they're running? Because I had in my head, I thought it would prevent you from actually tiring more. And so it's more likely you'd have the normal running form at the end of a marathon because you've had those walks. So I could see that being, but have you actually studied the biomechanics of runners using the strategy?
Yeah. So my background is not in exercise physiology. But when you watch people run at different paces, if you're using run walk, you're running, when you're running, you're going to run you can run a more natural pace than if you were to hold yourself back to that same pace. Let's say you're a half marathon, you're running a half marathon, but you decided to run the half marathon, slow down. You've trained for the half marathon, but you decided to slow down to marathon pace because you're doing it as a training run instead as a race. If you're holding yourself back to marathon pace when you're trained to run half marathon pace and you do it running only, then you're not going to be running. What tends to happen is that extra energy that you have tends to go into a bounce. You tend to bounce more, and that vertical oscillation isn't effective. It's not great for running, right? What you want is very little vertical oscillation and all your energy going into forward momentum. And so with run walk, you're able to do that during the run phase, and then the walk keeps you at the pace that you want to go. But you're absolutely right that the effect is by taking those walk breaks, your heart rate comes down, you're able to breathe, catch your breath, stretch, whatever, and you don't hit that wall, you don't run out of gas at the end of the race. And some people, as I said, I did, some people will cut the walk breaks out toward the end and run on to the finish. Others might not do that. The other effect is you tend to recover pretty quickly from that race effort or from the long run if you're not going at race pace. And so you can maintain your training or you can do another race later on. I did 3 marathons in November, and I don't think I could have done all 3 marathons had I not been doing run walk for those and for the training in between.
Who doesn't this work for? Does it? I mean, is there other types of people where you just either in terms of their mentality or, of course, we kind of talked about that mentality, but is there people that this just doesn't work for?
Or a speed limit where?
Yeah, I think there probably is a speed limit. But what I find, the people that are most resistant to it are people that are having success. They're happy with their running without walk breaks. And I, by no means, I am not an evangelist. I am not trying to convert you to the church of run walk. If you are happy running the way that you run and you're running without walk breaks, then please, I want you to be happy running. That's the most important thing, right? The most important thing for all of us is that people enjoy running, because if people enjoy running, then there will be more races that we can enjoy being in. There'll be more park runs that are available to us. There'll be more running paths that are set aside for us. We want more people to enjoy running. And so if people are happy running consistently, then I'm not trying to convert them. Who this is for are people that are frustrated with their running. They're frustrated either because they're not comfortable running, because they're gassing out. They're huffing and puffing when they're trying to run. They're the person that's just getting into it, and they're trying to run 5 miles at a stretch, and they can't even get half a block without having to stop and gasp. We're telling them, take walk breaks. It's okay. Do walk breaks, and now you can go to the end of the block and around the block, and then next week you might be able to do that 5K. So it's for those people. It's for people that are injury prone, because we found that this tends to keep people relatively injury free. We've had training programs in a number of cities around the world. We have training programs in a number of cities around the world now. And about 99% of the people that go through the training program are able to do the race that they are training for. There are other training methodologies that will result in fast finish times. There are lots of coaches out there that will get you a fast finish. But what I can do for you and what Jeff Galloway can do for you is get you to the starting line without getting injured. And I'm way more interested in getting you to the starting line uninjured than I am in getting you your Boston qualifying time or anything else. So it's for those people. And then it's for people like my son was, and you know, like I was to an extent, who are trying to reach that next level and they just can't get there. If somebody is listening to this and they have tried to qualify for Boston and they just can't get it, they've tried and they failed and they've tried and they failed and they just can't break through, what have you got to lose? Go ahead and give it a try. And I'm telling you, we've got tons of people every year that are doing it, but it does take swallowing your pride a little bit. It takes putting up with, you know, yes, from when you take that walk break just a few minutes into a run, you will have people, hey, it's okay, buddy, you can do it. You know, it's all right. You know, and when you're taking that walk break later in the race, oh, you don't have to walk, it's fine. And so you have to let that roll off your back. You have to know that it's a plan. Every single race that I do, if I'm not officially a pacer in the race, I will still have people that will see what I'm doing. I've been going back and forth with them. And as they're getting tired toward the end of the race, they'll ask, what are you doing? And can I come along for the ride? Can I try that? Every single time. And that happens, I think, to all of us that do run walk regularly. So when people are looking for that breakthrough, it can really do it. Now, you know, the fastest time that we know of, fastest marathon time that we know of for somebody doing run walk is 2:17. We have seen Jan Frodeno, when he won the Ironman World Championships the first time, he did a planned run walk. He did a walk break every mile, which at the pace he was going was an appropriate ratio to use. He would not have planned to take run walk if he didn't think it would help him win the world championship. So there are people that I've got friends that have run. My son won, you know, it was a small marathon, but when he did his 2:56, he won that marathon with that time using run walk. My wife was in the same marathon. She also won. She was the first female in that marathon using run walk. We've had people that have won 100-mile races and set course records on other ultras using it.
And how does it actually change the pace when you are running? Say, for example, your son who did 2:56, which would be, I guess, around 6:45 minute mile, something like that. Or say someone who's doing a Boston qualifier, 3:15, so I mean 7:26 a mile.
Yeah.
What would that change their pace to? How significantly a jump would it be when they are running?
It's about 30 seconds per mile faster when they're running. But you're not running for the full mile typically, right? You're only running for part of that mile. And it really is hard to be definitive because we all walk at different paces, right? Some people, when they take that 30-second walk break, they're walking at 13 minutes per mile for that walk break. And so they're not slowing down as much as I am. My average walking pace is somewhere around 18 minutes a mile. I'm a very slow walker. And so I probably, if I were running side by side with somebody who's a much faster walker, I would be running faster during the run phase than they were to make up for the fact that I'm walking slower than they are. It's what I do as a pacer. When I'm pacing a race and trying to run even splits, I don't even have current pace showing on my watch. I only have average pace, elapsed time, and distance because average pace is all that matters.
And so really that's, if I was to think of my numbers, that would be running a marathon at half marathon pace, really, when I'm running. Right. But with a lot of, I just love to see the London Marathon raced with people using different run walks. How great would that be if you've got Kipchoge and Bekele, and suddenly Kipchoge does his 30-second walk and Bekele's pulled away and then he stops it. I mean, that would be
properly exciting, wouldn't it?
It
That
would.
would fundamentally change it. Yeah.
It would be
It's
so cool.
so I do have a friend who is who's very fast. He's won ultras and set course records and has won marathons. And he uses run walk. He didn't always, but he's come to it. And he has kind of decided that in his next phase of his running, he wants to go out there and win a bunch of marathons using run walk, and just kind of show people that it can be done, because it destigmatizes it a bit, right? There are, now let's face it, the vast majority of people that are using run walk are slower runners, maybe heavier, maybe older, but they're not, they're slower runners. But guess what? The vast majority of runners are slower runners. So it's a great method for most runners when you look at it that way. But some of them do catch the brunt of those sneering comments that people make.
Absolutely,
I don't get that, right? I don't get that. I mean, people might try, but I'm, buddy, I'm running Boston this year. Are you? So, if you can sneer if you want, but this got me to Boston. If you haven't gotten to Boston doing it your way, then maybe you shouldn't judge. Now,
I think it needs I think
it
needs a Malcolm Gladwell episode, really, because when you look at his I think it's Outliers or David Vegan Life, I can't remember which book, he's talking about the Indian dad who takes over a girls' basketball team, and they all shoot underarm. They change the rules.
That's a great, yes. I listened to that story on his podcast, and I absolutely thought, oh my gosh, he needs to do something about Jeff Galloway, because it's exactly right. It's the underhand, but the reason you don't see the NBA players shooting the free throws underhanded is because they can't handle the booze, they can't handle the judgment, right? If they wanted it for their stats, it's what they would do. So there are plenty of runners that would be faster if they did run walk, but they won't do it because they're afraid. They're afraid of their ego can't take that, which is fine. And again, if they're having success, that's great. But what I want to do is destigmatize it. I hope that for them to be able to point to me and say he's running Boston, or point to my son and say he went under 3 hours, or point to my friend Mark who's, hey, he won that marathon. When they can point, or Jan Frodeno, he won the world championship Ironman. When they can point to examples of people that are using the method and using it successfully, hopefully that allows them, when they're at their local park run and they're doing run walk, it allows them to let it roll off their back when some, mean-spirited person, maybe not mean-spirited, maybe they really think that they're being helpful when they say, oh, you don't need to walk. They think they're being helpful, but
you'll be faster
not.
if you just and
right, but they're just being judgmental, really, and they don't realize it.
And do you think it is faster for shorter distances as well? Your 5Ks, your 10Ks,
I think it is, and I will confess to you, for the first time, I think this is the first time I've admitted this in a podcast. I did not use it in my shorter distance races when I was fast enough that I could have really proven that. I always used it for marathons. After that, my second marathon is when I tried it.
You could still go and test it now, because it's just relative to your times either way,
I can. Yeah. Well, first of all, I hate 5Ks. 5Ks hurt. I would give me 100-miler anytime over a 5K. But I do now. So I used to not. I'm really confessing here. I used to not use it for half marathons, even after I was coaching. I didn't use it for half marathons because because I was having success. I was fast enough. Running straight through, and so I didn't bother. If I was having success, I'm winning my age group, I'm podiuming, I'm doing whatever, I'm getting good results doing it, running straight through, I didn't feel like I needed it. So a few years ago, after I was definitely past my PRs, I had, or PBs as some folks say. I was down here actually for a Disney race. It was a Star Wars themed half marathon, and I was racing it. I wasn't pacing, and I knew I wasn't really in shape to go fast, but so I decided to do run walk, and I thought I was in shape. I figured 140 would be good for me for that particular race, and but I was going to do run walk. It was the first half. I had paced half marathons using run walk, but I never used it for my racing to see how fast I could go. And I decided to do it. And I think I ran 131. So I ran significantly faster using the walk breaks than I thought I was prepared for. And definitely faster than I would have gone without the walk breaks that day. And I was so angry with myself for not using the method 5 or 6 years earlier when I was setting my PRs. And I want, how much faster could I have gone in those half marathons if I had been using that method? Likewise, 15K, I do one 15K a year. And I've started using, I use run walk for the 15K now. And at 51 last year, I ran a time within a couple of minutes of what I would have run when I was 31. When I wasn't using run walk.
And in terms of your training, because most marathon plans, unless you're heavy mileage, is interval sessions, tempo sessions are part of the structure. Mm-hmm. How does walk run fit with that?
So obviously for all the long runs, definitely use it for all the long runs. And that's not, you're still doing your long runs 2 minutes. We recommend 2 minutes per mile slower than race pace. And so therefore the ratio, the amount of walking is going to be different than what you would do in the race, because the ratio is based on the pace you're going for that particular run. So you're walking more often. And so definitely for that. For the shorter runs, I tell my runners, they don't have to take walk breaks for the shorter runs. If you're doing a run with your friends or whatever, you can certainly do some runs without walk breaks. And if you want to be able to, if part of your strategy is going to be cutting out the walk breaks for the last 10K or so of the marathon, if that's part of your strategy, you should do some of your runs without walk breaks. But I also want them to do a tempo run once a week that is basically a race simulation. So at marathon pace, using the run walk ratio that you're going to use in the race so that you can get the feel of that. And we have a chart on jeffgalloway.com. There's a chart that shows how frequently you should take the walk breaks based on the pace you're going to go. And that chart is based on what we know works best for most people at that pace. But you aren't most people, and I'm not most people, and nobody is most people, right? You're just who you are. And so some people are going to be more comfortable running a little bit more between their walk breaks, running a little bit longer between walk breaks, which means they get to run slower while they're running. Other people are going to be more comfortable running a little bit faster between walk breaks, which means they take the walk breaks more often. And so what I want people to do is start with the ratio that's on the chart, do that for a week and see how that feels. And then the next week, try running longer between walk breaks and see how that feels. The next week, try running less, so that you're fine tuning it and seeing what works best for you. Jeff Galloway is a cheetah to me. He was an Olympian. He was actually, known as a marathon coach, but his Olympic event in the Munich Olympics was the 10,000. And so he's very, very fast in his day. And so even still, when he does run walk, he runs very fast for a short spurt, and then he walks. And he'll do like 30-second run, 30-second walk. The last time he qualified for Boston was a few years ago, and the time he needed back then was 4 hours, which is 9 minutes per mile. And he used a 30-second run, 30-second walk. Now, when I pace a marathon at 4 hours, I'm doing 2-minute run, 30-second walk. So I'm running longer and slower between those walk breaks. So for him, because he's got those fast twitch muscles, because he was a real cheetah, the fast and short is perfect for him. I'm an ultra runner. I'm more of a camel than a cheetah. And so going slower in between those walk breaks works better for me.
And is there any advice for how to actually walk safely, given if you're in New York or London, and you're going anywhere ahead of 6 hours and you start walking, it's an issue potentially.
Potentially.
So how do you, given that my fear would be you're constantly weaving and then constantly jamming into people. So is there a technique to ensure you can actually smoothly transition?
Yeah, you bet. And I've done it at, the most crowded races, and, I do it at Boston. I did it at New York. So the best thing to do, you've got to be aware of your surroundings. You've got to know when you're going to take your walks. And the best thing to do is to line up on one side or the other. And wherever, if there's going to be a sidewalk, that's the best. So for example, Boston, I like to start on the left side because there's room to get off on the left in the first few miles. Later in the race, I might make more room toward the right. At New York, I think I stayed more to the right because of where I was. I could, but figure out where there's going to be room. If there's grass, if there's a sidewalk, if there's something like that, you can get over when it's time to take your walk. And definitely don't weave. You're wasting energy if you do that. You need to make sure that the people around you know you're going to take a walk break. If you are going to take a walk break, it's coming up. You can look at your watch, when it's coming up. Don't pass somebody and then cut in front of them and take a walk. That's a way to get yourself hit or kicked, and you'll deserve it. So be aware. If you're about to pass somebody, but the walk break is coming up, just don't bother passing. Just cut in beside them and take your walk. If I am in a crowded race, I will often, and we'll tell people to do this, kind of wave your hand above your head, just to kind of draw attention to yourself, so that people know, and do that for 2 or 3 seconds before you take your walk, and then you take your walk. You're going to be going back and forth with the same people for a couple of hours or longer during these races. And so when they see you do that twice, on the third time, they know what that means. They know that guy's getting ready to take a walk break. And hopefully most races, they're not as crowded as you get further along. And so then there becomes more room, and you don't have to move over quite as much. Boston definitely got less crowded. This year, London, it was my first time running London, but at 6 hours, it was just as crowded at 5.5 hours as it was at 30 minutes. So I was, it was fun. It was amazing, but I was amazed that it was just as crowded the whole way through. Now I didn't have any trouble there because I was with a pace group, and we were, the pacers, there were 3 of us pacing that group, and we had agreed we were all going to do run walk. And so we were calling it out. Our group was calling out, so we would say, walking in 3, 2, 1. So everybody around us knew we were taking walk breaks. And so we try to do that in any race that we're pacing, to announce it so that the people that are with us at least are kind of protected, and the runners around us know that it's happening.
Well, we've got a few questions I've got to try and find now through the Instagram and Facebook. So the question from Long Runner John: I use 30-second walk breaks and very rarely run for more than 2 minutes, but there's a bit of a stigma attached at times, and people do look at me like I'm weird when I'm walking. How do you deal with people, and what do you say to them to basically give yourself a bit of space?
Yeah. So the shirt that I run in actually says "Run, Walk, Run" on the back of it. And I think that's a really good tip for a lot of people. If the race gives you a spare bib that you can, to write who you're running for, things like that, write "Run, Walk, Run" on the back, or get a shirt printed up so that people know that you're doing that. That'll help. And that way people know that it's a plan. Most people, when they're telling you, oh, you don't need to walk or keep running, they're not really criticizing you. They think
they're trying to be positive, aren't they?
Yeah, they're trying to be positive. So wearing something like that lets people know. I used to try to explain to people, no, it's part of a plan. No, this is the Galloway method. No, this is Jeffing or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't even bother. I just give them a thumbs up or a smile or a wave and let it go. But I do wear that shirt that says run, walk, run. And then for the Pacers shirts all say that, run, walk, run as well, so that it's clear. I imagine this year at London, since I'm doing 4:10, I imagine the other pacers at 4. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine the other pacers at 4:10 will not be taking walk breaks. At 6 hours, we all were, but I would imagine at 4:10, I may be the only pacer that's doing it, and so I'll talk with the pace coordinator and see if I can put something on the back of my pack to let people know that. But I'll be very vocal. I'll be calling it out so people will know.
And there's a good chance you'll be very split apart anyway, because different starts. So
right, that's true. With at 6, we were all from the same start, but I don't remember what the faster runners did.
Red will be quite far behind, like a green. Like green will be way ahead, probably 10-15 minutes ahead, I thought. But we've covered the other questions actually in the podcast already.
What do you know?
Anything else you'd throw into the mix, Jody?
I was just going to say, just a point about ultras, is that with marathon runners, you have that stigma, but almost when kind of like the emergence of ultras as mass participation, the run walk thing, I'm assuming that people were just like, yeah, we love run walk, because for some reason you go, a little bit further than 26 miles, and all of a sudden that stigma disappears, and it becomes sort of a key part of it. Do you find? Is that what you found as well?
100%. I absolutely found that. And there were people that were talking about the run walk method, that were recommending certain ratios years and years. When I first got into running hundreds, I came across it, and Jeff Galloway was completely unaware of it. And in fact, he has a book out now. His trail running book has training schedules for 50K, 100K, 50 mile, and 100 mile. And when he wrote that book, I had already done a few hundreds. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be so embarrassing if his training schedules and his recommendations in this book are different from what I've been doing and from what I've been coaching as a Galloway coach. But it's, no surprise, it's 100% compatible. It's exactly what I've been doing basically. And as the distances get longer, people do use more run walk. The strategies are strange, right? Some people, their strategy might be run 10 minutes, walk 2 minutes. I've come across a lot of people that do that. They tend to do longer walks, maybe later in the run.
That's what when I did my first like multi-day ultra, I struggled like on my first day. And then the race director, very experienced, runner and stuff like that. And he suggested, that's like when I first found out about kind of run walk, and that was almost exactly what he was suggesting. He goes run 10 minutes, walk 2 minutes, run 10 minutes, walk 2 minutes, because I could barely run as it was at that point. But that's kind of, I think that's how it kind of emerges for a lot of people who kind of start out in ultras.
It does. And I think the mentality, I think that the thought behind the 10-minute run is, well, you still want to, while you've got the energy, you want to run. And that's backwards, because what that's doing is it's that concept of banking time, right? When we all talk to runners that are banking time in races, whether it's in ultras or in marathons, and we all know, those of us that have done more than one race, we all know that the time bank is a myth. There is no time bank. You think you're banking time, that time bank is a myth. When you need that time back, it's going to be gone. You're going to lose it all at once. And so banking time is terrible. What you can bank is energy. And so if you do run walk and you use a conservative ratio early on, then you're saving your energy so that later in the race, you can spend that energy, you can use that energy. And so that might mean you're using that energy just to keep going the pace you've been going, like in an ultra, or it might mean now you're going to use that energy to pick it up and go faster, like in the last bit of a marathon or some shorter race. So my friend who won the Keys 100 a few years ago, everybody was doing some form of run walk in that 100-miler, but those that had done the race before and thought they were going to win it, thought they were going to do well, they kind of took off and ran pretty continuously for the first 20 miles or so before they started going into any sort of run walk. Mark, we had talked beforehand, and he decided to do 3 walks per mile. So his plan was every third of a mile, he took a short walk. And so the front runners took off without him and left him in their dust for a while. But by about 25 miles, he had started catching some of those folks. And by 50 miles, he was sharing the lead with another runner. And he ended up winning that 100-miler by a significant margin because he saved his energy. And those other folks thought they were banking time while they were fresh, but that doesn't work out.
And how does it work? Because as soon as you're not doing road marathons, hills are far more likely,
yes.
or trail or different terrain underfoot. What happens if you're coinciding your walk with a steep downhill, or you run with a steep uphill, or how do you adjust?
I faced that in my one and only. I've done 21 or 22 100-milers. I've only done 150-miler, and that was where I faced that dilemma. I had my run walk plan scheduled, and then my watch beeped for me to run, and I was climbing a mountain, and my watch beeped for me to walk, and I was going down the mountain. And I realized you just can't do that. So you absolutely, you hike the ups, you run the downs. If it's a short down, if it's a mile or less, at my level anyway, if it's a mile or less, I'll go ahead and run the whole thing down. If it's longer than that, I'll still try to find a way to put a walk in there, because you can really trash your quadriceps running hard down for a long distance. So breaking it up with walking is good. It might mean you have to do a little bit of serpentine coming down. It depends on what the course is like. At Hardrock, I certainly, like everybody else there, I power hike the ups. I run most of the downs. There's very little flat at Hardrock, but when there are a couple of spots where there's relative flat, and that's where I really have to commit to doing a ratio. I have to commit to doing some sort of run walk, because it's going to be faster than walking only, and it's going to be possible. Whereas running continuously through that stretch, if it's at 80 miles, might not be possible. So and I've had negative splits. I've run the second 50 miles faster at Hardrock than I have the first 50 by using a good strategy of don't run those ups, but don't waste the downs. Take advantage of it, but not trash the quadriceps. Definitely take the walks at least every mile if you are doing a long downhill.
Cool. Amazing. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and telling us all about the strategy. And do better. So let us know what you think, because I'm sure there'll be some listeners who've tried it before, but I'm sure there'll be a lot more who will try it. And I'm quite tempted myself.
And there's going to be some who are going to be critical of it, so we want to hear about that as well.
I hope you do. I hope you do try it, because I think, again, if you're a great runner, and so you're having great success without it. So you don't have to do it. It's not like you. But the fact that if you can give it an honest try, use the right ratio from the beginning, and see, you may not end up going any faster than you would otherwise, but I think you'll feel better at the end. One good example is we had 2 people that were pacing 3 hours for a marathon, and they were co-pacing 3 hours, and one ran continuously and one did run walk, and they did it just as that experiment. And the guy who did it continuously took about 2 weeks off afterwards and then got back to training. The guy who did run walk the next week set a PR at the 10-mile distance. So I think you would find you're able to recover faster. And so if it doesn't become something you do in racing, it might become something you do as a training
It's hard for
possibility.
David. It's hard for David because he's not run for such a long time that when he does get to run, to then say to him, "You're going to walk for a bit," I imagine that kills you, doesn't it?
Thankfully, Beer Lovers Marathon is on the
That is
horizon.
very much a run,
and there'll be a lot of walking and a lot of
There
standing.
you go.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Chris. And if people
Thank
want to get in touch and to kind of sign up to the plans and things like that, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, my email address, I'm Chris, CHRIS, @jeffgalloway.com. So that's the easiest way to reach me directly. C Twiggs on most things like Instagram and Twitter. And they can go to jeffgalloway.com and they can see where the customized training plan information is. And that's what I do. I coach the customized training plans there. And if any of them are going to be running London or going to be around London, I hope they come over and introduce themselves to me, and I can answer their questions in person there.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Chris, and good luck in Disney at the weekend.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
I love the idea of a 30-second run, 30-second walk for a whole marathon. Can you imagine that? If you're going in any kind of start area of London or New York,
I can't imagine doing it in a big city marathon. Like just stopping in front of someone, running it and stopping in front of someone, and then running and stopping in front of someone. Like you have to. It takes a lot of really not thinking about what other people think of you in order to do that.
But also, if you think of 30-second on, 30-second off, and you're running 4
hours.
Beep.
I mean, like, it does that. That must just get really annoying after a while, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's so intense. And also the pace differential. You're running probably 2:20 pace. You'd imagine.
I'd like to. I want to try it now. I want to try doing it because whenever you talk about walk run, I think of it in the ultra sense. In that, you run for 10 minutes, you walk for 2 minutes, and my perception always of that was, as you get better, those times get longer. So you run for 15 minutes and maybe you'd have 3 minutes walk, and then you got 20 minutes and you have like still 3 minutes walking and stuff like that. But that's not what it is at all. That's totally wrong. That's worse. That's like, and so you're like, okay, it's much more aggressive, isn't it? It's much more aggressive than you originally think, because you think, oh, run walk is kind of is like an easy option. It's kind of where you slow down and things like that. But actually, it must make a marathon go really quickly. Yeah, because you're engaged the whole time. You don't have time to just go and kind of relax and
just think of the massive. You're doing a walk run every 30 seconds like Jeff did, and you do a 4-hour one, which I think they said. Yeah. That means you're doing walking for 2 hours. So you're walking 8 miles, which means you're running 18 miles in 2 hours. So you're running pretty quick to do a sub-4 marathon. You're running around a 3-hour marathon pace to run a sub-4 marathon, with half of the time, the whole half of the marathon is spent walking. That is madness. I mean, I'm hopefully, I've run I'm building. People start to see I'm building up my Sundays now. I'm running less, but doing longer Sundays with the hope of doing a marathon. And actually, once I'm at that fitness, I'm going to go and walk a marathon just to see what it's like.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be really interesting. I think that'd be really good.
Yeah, and if it does work, and I assume it will, it must be easier to train to build up to a marathon as well. So it could be revolutionary for everyone who's not only can't be fucked, but as we get older, you want to do more with less, right? That's what it comes down to.
The thing is with you, I mean, I think it's easy, but the thing is with you, you know how to push yourself past that point of discomfort. And you're very good at it because you've paced other people, you've helped other people, stuff like that. And so you can do it for yourself. Whereas it almost, when you get to a certain age, you almost need to find something that stops you from doing that. And I suppose that this could be the thing that helps you, train for longer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In terms of, sorry, when I say for longer, I mean without having large breaks in between because of injury or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And also it takes the dread out of the Sunday run.
Takes the dread out of it. I think there's a big thing in that. I think there's a big thing. Although if you said to me, I've got to run for 30 seconds and then walk for 30 seconds for 4 hours. I don't know what.
You've got to do this. How many times is it? You've got to do this 500 times for your sub 4 hour. 500 times. I think it works out as 120. Yeah, 480 times. So, well, D-Badders, what do you think? Let us know your thoughts. Let us at badboyrunning.com. And if there are any subjects or people you'd like us to interview in the future, then message me, David at badboyrunning.com. Please do leave a review. It helps us, helps with our profile. It helps us therefore get better guests. And the keyword that you need to try and get in your review. What should the keyword be? I'm trying to think. Mickey Mouse.
Just use the term Mickey Mouse as an adjective.
Mickey Mouse as an adjective.
Yeah. This is a Mickey Mouse podcast. We could.
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse
Exactly.
presenters, Mickey Mouse podcast, Mickey Mouse sound quality. That's everything you got to say.
Yeah, leave a review of Mickey Mouse in. Ideally 5 stars, please. And we'll read it out in one of the future podcasts. Anything to throw in the mix, Jody?
Yeah, if you want to join the conversation, head to the Facebook group, type in answer 3 questions, and we will let you join the other D-Badders in merriment and fun. And
we will see you guys next time.
See you later.
Bye.
Fuck you, buddy.